And it's obvious, too, that you developed analytical skills in advising BCG's clients that were at the center of how you managed at PepsiCo. Let's come to PepsiCo. You had this interlude at Motorola and then at ABB. But then in 1994, as I read this, you came to PepsiCo. I want to ask you. Here's a traditional American retail brands company. Pepsi, obviously, Mountain Dew, snack foods, Fritos, a whole range of things we can talk about. But you characterize the weaknesses of that culture in a very brief and devastating way. I'm going to quote from your book. You say that when you joined PepsiCo, white American men held 15 of the top 15 jobs at PepsiCo when I walked in. I don't believe that any of their wives worked in paid jobs outside of their homes. So this was a very traditional company. And I want you to explain first what it was like for you as an Indian American to come into that company. And second, how that traditional culture was hurting the company as you began to understand it.
Well, I don't think it was hurting the company because we're talking about 1994 and the ideal worker of the times who had worked their way up the company was still the white male who worked outside the home with a wife taking care of the home. Those are the people that ascended to the top of all corporations, not just PepsiCo. The fact that Wayne Calloway, who grew up in that system, made such an outreach to get me into PepsiCo demonstrated to me that PepsiCo was very keen on bringing diversity into the ranks, into the senior most ranks, and that too bringing somebody in who's outspoken, who was different, who was a globalist. And they're saying, hey, look, come into this company. We want to change. We want your kind of thinking in our senior ranks. And guess what? Wayne said, I'm going to make sure that I develop you and mentor you. And it was not just Wayne, Bob Detmer, who was CFO at that time, who actually was my boss, was an unbelievable supporter and mentor who made me feel very, very welcome. So the fact that 15 of the 15 men who occupied senior positions were all white men was not a judgment I was making. I'm just saying that was what I observed. But they made me feel very, very welcome in a company where, the brands were iconic American. The business model was not something I was really used to. I didn't know restaurants because we own KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut. I had to learn everything from scratch. But the BCG training helped me, really get my feet wet. But I must say, I would not call PepsiCo an old-fashioned company. I'd call it a youthful, progressive, welcoming company. And had they not been that, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Useful point. You mentioned the PepsiCo brands of the time, Pizza Hut, KFC, Taco Bell. And one of the interesting business stories you tell in the book is about the painful decision for a company that thought of those brands as part of the family of brands that they all nurtured. The decision to spin off that restaurant business. Tell us about that. Tell us why it hurt. Tell us why it was the right thing for PepsiCo at the time.
Great question. I think when the restaurant business, especially the quick serve restaurant business, the QSR business, was growing in leaps and bounds, and what you really needed was the financial capability to build restaurants, get franchisees, and grow fast, PepsiCo was very good at it. When the growth rate in the quick serve restaurant industry slowed down because every new unit you built cannibalized an existing unit you had already. So the overall growth rate slowed down. You had to move from your financial skills to a service culture where you actually worried about in-restaurant service, how you treated customers. A very different group of people needed to get involved. PepsiCo is full of bright young people and packaged goods people who love to do brands, advertising, marketing, but we were not a service culture oriented business. So it became very clear to us that we needed to unfetter the restaurant business from the packaged goods culture. So it was not a separation, it was an unfettering of the restaurant business from the packaged goods company. And when we did this, painful though it was, the restaurant business began to soar under the leadership of Andy Pearson and then David Novak. And it did exceedingly well, way better than it would have done under a PepsiCo. And PepsiCo could then focus on all the packaged goods that it was very good at and did very well on its own. So I think the biggest learning from all of this is we all might get into businesses, but we have to know when that business and the driver of that business value is not what the company is good at managing against, and know when to separate it out from the mothership. And that's what we did in 1996 with the restaurant business.